Throughout the years, I worked with various different volunteer-based organizations, and I worked with countless volunteers who were dedicated to their projects. And during all that time, there's this one question that people would ask me on a regular basis. Because volunteering, isn't that like working without being paid? And why on earth would you do that? And I can tell you this question becomes quite frustrating after a while, because how do I explain that I choose to do something that doesn't necessarily help me pay my bills? Usually I'd answer these people in a way like, I just really enjoy what I do here, or isn't it great to contribute to a project like this? And these answers didn't really seem to satisfy these people. They'd simply rephrase their question and pose it again, or blatantly tell me I was crazy for doing whatever it was I happened to be doing at that very moment. After a couple of years, I got fed up with this, and I decided I want to answer this question for once and for all. But I felt to be able to do that, I had to answer another question first. What is volunteering actually? This question sounds really straightforward, but it's not. What is it that I and countless other people do? And if we can define this, shouldn't it be easier to explain why we do it? So I decided to start out old school, grab my dictionary, flip to the correct page, look up the word to volunteer, and this is what it said. To work for an organization without being paid. And well, this brings us right back to the beginning and the question, why on earth would you do that? Especially in a day and age where it's very common to spend your time and energy for the exact reason of getting money in return. So after some more research, I came across a quote by a man named Lester M. Salomon. Mr. Salomon is a professor at the Johns Hopkins University and the director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Civil Studies in the United States. Basically, the man is a leading specialist on the nonprofit sector worldwide. And what the professor had to say was this: volunteer work is an enormous renewable resource for social, economic, and environmental problem solving throughout the world. But the lack of solid data on volunteering has left it undervalued and its full potentials unrealized. Now, let's have a good look at what the professor says here. An enormous renewable resource, problem solving throughout the world. Volunteers do not get paid for what they do, but they are part of a global movement that sparks change within our world. And now, how about that solid data? And the professor is correct. There is a serious lack of solid data within this field. We simply do not know how many people are active as a volunteer, and we don't really know how many organizations depend on these volunteers. For example, here in the Netherlands, in 2015, one organization stated that 37% of the Dutch population volunteers at least once per week. That very same year, another organization claimed that to be 49%, which is a very substantial difference. So how widespread is volunteering then? According to a report published by the UN in 2011, there were 13.1 million active volunteers for Red Cross and Red Crescent worldwide. 13.1 million. That is more people than live in the country of Belgium. And that is just one organization. That is not the people volunteering in a homeless shelter downtown right now as we speak. And that is not the people involved with any other global organization. That is not my mother helping out during school lunches when I was a teenager, or me teaching elderly people how to use a computer. But I believe the most important of what Professor Salomon has to say is in the words in which he states volunteering is undervalued and its full potential unrealized. These people who ask me why I work without being paid, they apparently fail to see the value and the potential of volunteering. And apparently they're not the only ones. If we cannot provide solid data to show how valuable and important it is that we volunteers do what we do, then how can we explain why we do it in the first place? And now, since the data won't help us, let's bring this down to a more human scale. Let's not look at volunteers as part of a statistic, but as individuals with their own stories. And now, I cannot tell you the story of 13.1 million Red Cross volunteers, but I can tell you one of my stories, and I'm hoping to bring this down to a smaller scale, to a local scale. We're in Dordrecht right now, and I love this city very much. Even though I wasn't born here, I definitely rooted here, and I feel at home where I am. But when I came here for the first time about 10 years ago, I didn't know anyone, I didn't know my way, and the city was a complete mystery to me, and it left me isolated pretty much for a year. Until I lost my job and I found myself with nothing to do. So on a whim, I decided to start volunteering for a local music venue. It's named Bibelo. It's one of the oldest venues in the country. It depends on volunteers, and it has a very colorful history. What started out as a way for me to spend time while being in between jobs resulted in being involved with this organization for years. Together with my newfound friends and colleagues, we provided people a place to go out and bands and artists a stage to perform. We created a place for people to connect and local culture to develop. For myself, personally, I became part of a very diverse community. I rooted within the city that is currently my home, and it's one of the places that showed me the value and the potential of volunteering, and it led me partially to what I do today, making volunteer projects happen. Ironically, volunteering for this venue also landed me 3 different paid jobs over the years. But that is just my story. That is not the story of the hundreds of people that came and went within this one organization. That is not the story of Bibelo itself creating opportunities for itself as an organization, the city, and local culture. That is not the story of all these other volunteer-based organizations in just this one city. So, having looked at the data and personal stories, what is volunteering? I believe this question can be answered in many different ways, and my answer is volunteering is being part of an organization without being paid, but at the same time being part of a global movement that sparks change within our world that is much needed. So those people who ask me why I work without being paid, I tell them I don't work without being paid. I am part of something that changes our world. I choose to be part of a community and to provide something that is apparently needed. And let's be honest, without all those volunteers doing those exact same things, many organizations would not be able to exist. Every single volunteer is unique and individual, and they have their own story. They embody the value and the potential of their work and the organization they're involved with. Without them, our society would simply not be what it is today. Thank you.